Ladies and gentlemen, I just got out of the theater watching Superman, and we are going to talk about it. Hello everyone, I'm K-Swope, and the moment has finally come. I finally just saw Superman, James Gunn's new one, the 2025 one, and I have some thoughts, I have things we're going to talk about. It's going to be a great time. But here's how this video is going to work. We're going to be reviewing the movie. We're going to talk about the good things about the movie, the bad things about the movie. That's going to be without spoilers. So we're going to talk about the non-spoiler stuff first, and then we're going to move into the spoiler section, and then we'll go back to non-spoilers for our conclusion. You can see the timestamps down below to skip around if you need to, if you don't want the movie spoiled for you. So just be wary of those parts. We'll put a spoiler warning, all that jazz. But, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and dive right in. Now, I have reviewed all the Superman movies so far building up to this, and I can tell you there's one thing that for some reason always keeps coming up in every Superman movie, and that is the opening credits. This film, of course, is no different. The opening credits are great. They pay homage to, obviously, the original Christopher Reeve Superman films. I mean, they should because they're classic. They do that both in, like, the title card of the movie, the opening stuff, and at the very, very end. But it does it in such a way that it feels like it's not just cramming it in for the sake of nostalgia and trying to cash grab off of it. It feels like it's doing it because it's respecting its past, but they're also kind of blending the style with something a little more modern, something a little more recent. So I do like seeing that. It's pretty nice. So again, they paid a lot of attention. Obviously, James Gunn had an idea. He knew what he was doing, and he knew that he had to be able to make a film that was going to pay respects to the original ones and not depart super duper far from what we saw in the Zack Snyder films. Also got to say, I do like the characters in this movie quite a lot. I think they're all fleshed out really well, and they're all quite likable. James Gunn is a basically professional at that. He's fantastic at those kind of things. Characters, character building, all that jazz. We can see that a lot. I also got to say, too, speaking of James Gunn, this movie, out of all the James Gunn films I've seen, it still feels like a James Gunn film, but it seems like the least James Gunny of a film I've seen, and that's probably a good thing because I know a lot of people were really worried about that going into this film. They thought, hey, James Gunn, he did this, and this with Guardians of the Galaxy. They're great films. Maybe they're not the most comic accurate films, this, and that. And same thing with like the Suicide Squad. But I love all of those movies I just mentioned, and this one feels a lot different than them. There's still a lot of moments where you're like, okay, yeah, this is very James Gunn, but they're sort of here and there. They're not all over the place. It does not feel like a heavy-handed James Gunn movie, and I think that works in the film's benefit. Also got to talk about the score of the film. It's fantastic. The music in it is awesome. They use a lot of familiar, we'll just say, motifs and things like that you should be familiar with if you're a big Superman fan. They also just have some really good original stuff. Like, they've got, original themes and motifs for the Justice Gang, the Justice League precursor that we see throughout this film. So there's some really good themes for that. And then, like, Lex Luthor's got a really nice theme that I like that sounds a little mechanical. I don't know how to describe it, really, because I only, heard it once, and it was in the middle of a theater when there was a million other stuff going on screen. But either way, it's really good. I really like it, and I think the score was in good hands with the guys. It was like John Murphy and another guy, I think, too. I'm terrible with names and stuff like that, but you get what I'm saying. They did a great job, so give credit to them for doing that. Fantastic. A little more about the score later in the spoiler section. I don't want to spoil that too much. I don't know what you consider a spoiler or not. This is not going to be a big spoiler, but we will dive more into that, so don't you worry. The filmography is also fantastic in this film. It looks very nice. They do a good job getting some really nice shots as well. So the film just looks fantastic, generally speaking, and I'm a very big fan of how that looks. Now, unfortunately, I do have some bad things I got to say about this. Okay, again, this is spoiler-free bad stuff, but there's a few things I just got to mention. For one, they set up in the film that they're going to be questioning Superman's ethics and things like that. And they ask these questions, and they don't really answer these questions. The questions that they ask are more used to set up the rest of the plot, which I'm not going to dive into at this point. And so for me, it leaves me a little unsatisfied with how they went about that. So I'm not a really big fan of that. I think, anytime a film brings up a question, they need to answer the questions all the time, straight up. And I just feel like this film fails to do that. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it sort of leaves me with more questions than answers. We're going to dive into the specifics in the spoiler section of what I mean, but just know that that's kind of how I feel about certain things, both narratively in the plot and just certain items where it's like, so that's just there, and we're just supposed to be like, oh, okay, when I would have liked, a little more background explanation for it, then it's just, oh yeah, this person has this item, and yeah. So it's not that it's out of character or out of pocket, just kind of shows up. But it's like when they're setting things up in the film, they're like, oh yeah, this character has this, and this. And you just roll with it, and they don't really explain it much more past that. that's something I have a problem with, because this film lacks origin stories, okay? And a lot of superhero films are doing that now. They're just ditching origin stories altogether. I get the idea behind it, okay? I don't hate that. However, I feel like when you get rid of the origin story, you don't know where this version of the character is really coming from. So if you look at Spider-Man, for example, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, they were classic. They told the origin story. They did all that stuff. Then when you have the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films, it's very more, they're basing it a lot on the edge of like the Dark Knight films and all that stuff going on. And so it's a lot more gritty of a Spider-Man, at least for the first film, telling the origin story. This one, I don't know. It's got the same problem I think Tom Holland's Spider-Man has, where it's like the origin story when he first showed up was just kind of grazed over. And yeah, we all know the story, don't get me wrong. So I'm not saying that, we need to be spoon-fed the Spider-Man story over and over again, or the Superman story for that matter. But I would at least appreciate if they were to just give us a little more background, some type of context to better help us understand where this hero is coming from. Again, it is Superman. We should know that. We should get that. But they also don't do that for certain other characters in the film that I think really deserve that. Especially when you have these Justice Gang characters who they don't really explain at all. They're just kind of there. I mean, they explain a little bit briefly, but just not enough to satisfy me personally. And so I have some problems with that. It definitely counts against the film's quality, in my opinion. On a more superficial note, I do have to say this film, in the first trailer, the coloring, everything looked really like blue. And I was not a fan of that. And they did touch that up. It does look a lot better now. It's a little more like yellowish. And I do like that more. But it's just, the coloring feels off to me in the film. I don't know why. Just like low-key distracting me. Like when I see Clark Kent, he's got this really, dark black, jet black hair. But the blacks are not true blacks. They got like that little like blue tinge to them or whatever. And I'm like, that's kind of distracting me. So it's not a big deal. Again, it's just purely an aesthetic thing. But something that I just kind of found annoying. There's also a twist at the end of this film that I saw coming from a mile away, which I'll talk all about that in the spoiler section, but I'm not going to say that here and now. But if you know anything about comics and you know anything about this film building up to it, there's one character you probably saw and you were probably scratching your head about, and you probably thought it was one of two things, and it's one of those. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Maybe I've gotten to spoiler territory with that already. I do apologize, but yeah, it's left a lot to be desired for me, unfortunately. I feel like this film, though, does have some cardinal sins that I do not like about a lot of modern comic book movies, specifically like DC stuff. Like, we're going off topic for a minute or two here, but the movie The Batman, okay? Spoiler for a review I'll probably end up doing one day, but I'm not a big fan of that film. I'll tell you all why when I do that review. But one thing in that film that they change is they fiddle a little bit with Batman's origin story and basically doing what they did in the Telltale series, which is making Bruce Wayne's money dirty, okay? Like his parents were involved in some shady stuff. And I don't dislike that idea. I think the Telltale series pulled it off very well. It was very original there. And you're like, oh, okay, this makes this a different Batman. And they did it then in The Batman. And by that point, it's like, yeah, I've seen that twist already. And there are certain areas of this film where they have twists that are similar to that in certain degrees with certain characters. I won't say what or how. And I don't like it because it feels unoriginal to me because I've seen it twice already. And it was already unoriginal the second time. So I don't want to see it again. And it just keeps getting shoved down my throat. And a common problem that happens with Superman stories that this film definitely, I think, has a little bit is I feel like it really lacks stakes until the third act. Meaning that, Superman is super powerful, so, you can't really overpower him unless you got, like, kryptonite or whatever, something like that. And there are moments in the film where that kind of stuff happens to him. However, I just feel like, he's Superman, he's fighting these giant kaijus and stuff like that, and I don't know. I just feel like throughout the whole film, the stakes just feel very low to me. And it takes till, the big climax at the end for me to feel like, oh, okay, yeah, I think this might be a challenge. And I don't know how Superman's going to, pull this off, but it was certainly interesting. And this movie also, I feel like it takes a lot of time to tell stories of characters who are not Superman. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's probably the Justice Gang, but not quite as much. More with Superman's side cast of characters, specifically Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane, which are not bad picks. And I think the stuff in that film with those characters are good. So I will recommend that. That is, very good. Again, the characters, I like the characters in this film. I do like them quite a lot. There's just certain things that I don't like, again, because they focus so much on that. I mean, Superman feels kind of sidelined and neutered for a lot of this film, honestly. And I won't go into why or any of that stuff, but it's certainly interesting. We'll put it like that. And little bit disappointed, not going to lie. Moving into my notes. These are spoiler-free notes. I have no spoiler notes. Moving into my spoiler-free notes. There is a henchman named Otis in this film who gets referenced by name once, And I'm like, that's funny. I got that reference. That's, of course, from the original Christopher Reeve Superman film, and Superman 2, actually. There was, Otis. I hated Otis in those films, though. Yeah, I enjoyed the callback. And this Otis didn't look or act anything like that Otis, so it's fun. I saw that. I appreciated it. It's also funny, too, because there's a license plate number you can see on a car that belongs to someone who lives in Metropolis, and the license plate is Delaware, which I guess canonizes that in the DCU, Metropolis is in Delaware. At least that's what I think. So there's a little, geography, food for thought for you. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to take us to our spoiler section. So if you did not see the spoiler warning like 3 seconds ago, click out now because you're in for a lot. However, come back because we are going to be going to the conclusion non-spoiler once again. But that being said, there's your spoilers. I'm going to go back into the good section and I'm going to spoil a lot of stuff, and you're going to be disappointed if you don't see the movie before I spoil it. So here we go. There are a lot of cameos in this film. First things first, if I'm not mistaken, that was Bradley Cooper who played Jor-El, which we see in this hologram message and stuff. And I thought that was pretty interesting because, Jor-El, Bradley Cooper, I wouldn't have thought of that, but I saw him in the role and I'm like, that kind of fits. I can see that. He's also one of James Gunn's buddies and people he collaborates with a good bit. So seeing him in this film did not surprise me, but I did not expect it whatsoever. That was the biggest, or second biggest maybe, surprise cameo in this film. The next cameo, I will say, was none other than our homeboy Peacemaker. So he shows up just kind of like sort of in the background on TV. He's on like a talk show giving his thoughts on like the Superman stuff, which is kind of funny. And I really, really want to see how that plays out. I really, really want to see how this is going to look in Peacemaker season 2, because I wonder if they're going to touch on that or how that's going to come about. So very much looking forward to that. I'm sure it's going to be great. We also, biggest cameo that I was not expecting, other than Bradley Cooper, was Supergirl. She shows up. So that is really, really cool. We know the Supergirl film is coming. We know, same actress, same everything like that. She shows up for a little bit at the end. And so that was nice to see. Nice to see that cameo. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to the Supergirl film. I always kind of sort of was. But, now I can officially say, okay, I've kind of seen her in the role now. I like where this is going. I really want to see it. So it'll be fun. Now, I'm not a big Supergirl fan. I don't know if they trash the character or not in just the one scene she's in, because they certainly do some things. We'll put it like that. But, yeah, I don't know. But either way, from the little bit I saw, little taster we got, when Supergirl comes out, I plan to be there. So it should be fun. Looking forward to that. I also got to say, too, the score of the film, I mentioned that before in the non-spoiler section. They, just like they did in the trailers, they use the John Williams Superman theme, and they use it a lot, and they use it well, let me tell you. And I absolutely love that. Some people might say that's unoriginal, and, I am inclined to agree with that, just off my gut. However, I disagree in some ways, because I think the John Williams score is just so engraved in Superman's DNA that you're never going to be able to make anything that comes that iconic, to that character. And so they used it. Again, the rest of the score is very original, very done well. It was perfect. And personally, I wouldn't have changed a single thing about the score. I thought the score was fantastic. I only hope that when they do the Brave and the Bold or any type of Batman thing next, they do the same idea, but they steal the Danny Elfman Batman theme, because for me, that is just as iconic as the John Williams Superman theme. So I really need to see that, because now that I know that they're willing to do that, that's what I really, really want to see. Now, moving to the bad section now with the spoilers. So in the film, there's this whole plot going on right now with these countries and like somewhere in the Middle East or whatever. The president of the one country, Lex Luthor's working for, he struck a deal with him to get him arms and weapons and stuff like that to take over this other country in exchange for Lex Luthor to get a portion of the two countries that could be his own country, which is pretty interesting. However, the reason that I have to bring this up is because toward the end of the film, Hawkgirl literally swoops the guy up and just drops him to his death. And I'm like, it feels kind of out of character, for one. And for two, the other issue is they've spent so much of this film talking about how Superman just kind of goes into other countries and does things without, consulting or, conspiracizing or whatever with anyone, any countries, almost like, for lack of a better term, messing up the stabilization of things, which is a fine question to ask, and I think it's good. They don't answer that question in any way that satisfies me. But then you got Hawkgirl going and doing this, and I'm like, that is worse than anything Superman's done. So what the heck? I need answers to this, and I'm not going to hold out for them to do it in another DC project, because if you're going to be doing something like that in a film like this, you need to answer those questions in a film like this. And so that's just bad, honestly. And I hate to say that because I was looking forward to this film so much, that this has just got one thing in here that's just straight up bad, and I just do not like it at all. Now, we also have another thing. I mentioned in the spoiler-free section, things that are not explained, they don't give enough explanation to, and I think one of those big ones is Lex Luthor's pocket dimension. They talk about how he gets it, and blah, 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 blah. That's all fine and dandy, but I really wish they would have given it some setup, because it's just like, oh yeah, he has a pocket dimension, guys, and that's it. He just pops in and out of it. And there's also, like, in the pocket dimension, he keeps all these prisoners, and it's like, well, we haven't heard anything from these prisoners or anything like that. And he's got Metamorpho in there for some reason. They don't explain that at all. Because if these characters and things were given an origin, and then you would see them show up, it's almost like there are films that should have happened before this to explain these characters. Because I don't think it's a bad thing per se, especially when you got your own, universe and multiverse, like what Marvel will do sometimes. Every character they introduce has some type of setup. So then when you see them in something else, you're like, oh yeah, it's that character from that thing, okay? Which does get annoying after some time. However, it works. And the Metamorpho thing and the pocket dimension stuff just doesn't work for me. Because the pocket dimension, I know it's a big build-up, and that's how we get the whole climax of the film. I'm not saying it is a bad plot device. I'm just saying I do not like how they just don't explain it, and at the beginning of the movie, Lex Luthor has this whole pocket dimension thing. I feel like that does not feel like a good setup and payoff. It just feels like, there's this thing, and then the thing gets worse. So I'm, of course, not a fan of that at all. Now, the twist of the film is this. Ultraman, he exists. If you know anything about the comics, you should know Ultraman is the evil version of Superman from Earth 3, where they got the crime syndicate, yada, 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 right? Well, there's no dimensional travel other than the pocket dimension inside this film, okay? So, knowing that Ultraman was in this film, I knew that there were two things. One, he had to be from another dimension, but like I said, that's not an option, okay? Or two, he is some type of Superman knockoff, Bizarro, something like that. And sure enough, he was a clone of Superman, and I saw that coming a mile away because he was completely hooded the whole time. He's the same height as Superman. He's got the same powers as Superman, and they get into the Fortress of Solitude because they have Superman's DNA because of Ultraman. And so I was not surprised by any of that stuff, and I thought it was kind of lame, honestly. And so when they finally did the big reveal, and they're like, oh, it's like another Superman, I was just like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. And so that was very disappointing. The twist fell so flat for me, and it was just not good. He ends up getting sucked in a black hole, so we can pretty much consider him gone and dead. I don't think we'll be seeing him ever again. At least that version. I'd love Lex Luthor to try to attempt to make a new Ultraman, and in doing so, creates Bizarro. That'd be cool. I'd much rather this Ultraman be Bizarro. They already said he was dumb as a brick, and that was perfect for Bizarro. So I would just have rather them do that. Or if they would have just name dropped him as Bizarro, or if he even looked a little bit, like a messed up, zombified, if you will, Superman clone, I could be satisfied with that. I would be totally fine. That would float my boat, no problem. But they didn't go that route, and I do not like the route that they went with. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and close our can of spoilers, go back to our spoiler-free section, and here is the gist of it, ladies and gentlemen. So, for my conclusion, after watching this film, there is a thought that I had, okay? I was trying to compare it to other films I've seen like that, and I realized that it's pretty good. I didn't love it like I thought I was going to, so I am quite disappointed about that. Now, that's not going to skew my review of it, but the way I see it, the closest thing I can compare it to is just a decent Marvel movie. Not like a fantastic Marvel movie, just a decent one. I'm talking like Doctor Strange, okay? Doctor Strange, in my opinion at least, was not phenomenal, but it was decent. It was all right. And so I give it, I don't know, coming out of the theater just now without thinking about it too much, just with the little thoughts that I put out here, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. So that is for Superman. 7 out of 10, ladies and gentlemen. And that is going to wrap things up today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me on this Superman journey. If you have not seen my other reviews for Superman stuff, hey, we got them all right here. And of course, I'll be dropping more things, more reviews, more reactions. I know that tomorrow, the first episode of Dexter Resurrection comes out, and I'm very, very excited for that. So you can expect more Dexter content coming up on the way as well. A few more things I feel like doing some videos about here and there, commentary, reviews, reactions, things like that. So if you're interested in those, hey, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to see you here. If you saw Superman, you have different thoughts compared to what I had, we'd love to see you drop a comment, and I read all of them, trust me. So make sure you drop them, and I will do what I can to get back to you. And And if you like this video, of course, drop a like. But ladies and gentlemen, it's going to wrap things up for me. I'm K Swope, and I will see you in the next one.